Amelia, resplendent in a midnight blue gown that clung to her curves like a second skin, felt a cold seep into her bones that the expensive fabric couldn't quite ward off. Around her, the annual Vandergelt Charity Gala was in full swing, a swirling vortex of wealth, power, and meticulously constructed smiles. It was, as always, a dazzling spectacle. And Amelia, as always, felt utterly, achingly, out of place. She raised her glass, the crystal cool against her painted lips, and took a small sip, the bubbly liquid doing little to quench the dryness in her throat. She scanned the room, a sea of familiar faces, yet felt a profound sense of isolation. There was Beatrice Van Heusen, draped in enough diamonds to finance a small nation, whispering secrets behind her hand. Across the room, Arthur Finch, the senator, was holding court, his booming laughter echoing off the vaulted ceilings. And over there, by the ice sculpture that was slowly melting into a sad, watery puddle, stood her husband, Charles. Charles Vandergelt IV. He was the reason Amelia was here, trapped in this gilded cage of privilege and expectation. He was tall, handsome in a predictable, almost manufactured way, and impeccably dressed in a tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than Amelia's entire wardrobe before she married him. He was also utterly boring. He was holding court with a group of equally impeccably dressed men, their faces etched with the same blend of entitlement and ennui that Amelia saw mirrored in her own reflection too often these days. They were discussing something, probably the stock market or the latest polo match, subjects that held absolutely no interest for Amelia. She watched him, this man she had promised to spend the rest of her life with, and felt a pang of something akin to pity. For him, for herself, for the charade they both perpetuated so flawlessly. She found herself drifting toward the edge of the ballroom, seeking a moment of respite from the suffocating atmosphere. She needed air, a breath, something to remind her that there was a world beyond these chandelier-lit halls and forced pleasantries. She spotted Penelope, a lifelong friend who, blessedly, had managed to maintain a semblance of normalcy despite the pressures of their social circle. Penelope was a breath of fresh air, a vibrant splash of color in a world of muted tones. Tonight, she wore a simple, elegant black dress, her fiery red hair pulled back in a chic updo. Amelia threaded her way through the crowd, a practiced maneuver honed over years of navigating these social minefields. "Penelope," she said, reaching her friend and offering a small, weary smile. Penelope turned, her green eyes lighting up. "Amelia! Darling, you look stunning. Though, if I didn't know better, I'd say you looked absolutely miserable." Amelia chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. Intuitive as always. This is all just exhausting. The forced smiles, the meaningless conversations, the constant pressure to be too perfect. Penelope nodded, her expression sympathetic. "I know the feeling. It's like living in a perpetual performance." Amelia sighed. "Exactly. And I'm tired, Penelope. I'm so incredibly tired of performing." She hesitated, then blurted out, the words tumbling out of her like a dam had broken, "I'm tired of married life." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Penelope's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. She knew Amelia well enough to know that she needed to vent, to release the pressure that had been building for far too long. "It's not that Charles is a bad man," Amelia continued, choosing her words carefully. "He's kind, generous, responsible. He provides me with everything a woman could possibly want. But—" She trailed off, searching for the right words to express the emptiness that gnawed at her from the inside out. "But he doesn't see you, does he?" Penelope finished for her, her voice soft and understanding. "He sees the image of what he thinks a wife should be. The perfect hostess, the elegant socialite, the embodiment of Vandergelt respectability." Amelia nodded, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "He doesn't see Amelia. He doesn't see the woman who loves to paint, who devours books, who dreams of traveling the world and actually experiencing it, not just seeing it from the window of a private jet. He sees a possession, an accessory to his already impressive life." Penelope reached out and squeezed Amelia's hand. "I know, darling. I see you. And I know how stifled you must feel." Amelia took a deep breath, trying to regain control of her emotions. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, Penelope. I feel like I'm slowly suffocating. Just then, a shadow fell over them. Charles, his face etched with a polite, but undeniably impatient, expression, stood beside them. Amelia, darling, he said, his voice smooth and controlled, I've been looking for you. The Belgian ambassador is here, and he's eager to meet you. Amelia looked at him, at his perfectly tailored suit, his perfectly sculpted hair, his perfectly bland expression, and a wave of nausea washed over her. She couldn't do it. She couldn't play the perfect wife for one more minute. Charles, she said, her voice betraying none of the turmoil raging within her, I'm feeling a bit unwell. I think I need some air. He frowned slightly. Nonsense, darling. A little fresh air won't solve anything. You need to be seen. It's important for the brand. The brand? Amelia repeated, her voice dangerously low. Is that all I am to you, Charles? A brand? He seemed taken aback by her tone. Amelia, what's gotten into you? You know that's not what I meant. No, Charles, she said, shaking her head slowly. I don't think I do know. I don't think I've ever really known you. She turned to Penelope, her eyes pleading. I need to leave. Now. Penelope, understanding dawning in her eyes, nodded. Of course, darling. Let's go. As Amelia turned to leave, she caught the eye of someone standing near the edge of the crowd. A man she hadn't noticed before. He was leaning against a pillar, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He was tall, with dark, unruly hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wasn't dressed in a tuxedo like the other men, instead, he wore a simple, well-cut suit that spoke of effortless elegance rather than manufactured wealth. There was something about him, something untamed and undeniably magnetic, that drew her in. Their eyes locked, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed to fade away. In that instant, she felt a spark, a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, desire, excitement, a sense of possibility. It was a dangerous, reckless feeling, but it was also undeniably exhilarating. As she walked past him, she felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She didn't know who he was, or where she was going, but in that moment, she knew one thing for sure, she was leaving. Charles, oblivious to the silent exchange that had just taken place, reached out to take her arm. Amelia, please. Don't be ridiculous. She pulled away, her eyes blazing. I'm done being ridiculous, Charles. I'm done being what you want me to be. I'm going to be myself. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Charles standing speechless in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by the glittering remnants of their gilded cage. As she reached the edge of the ballroom, she glanced back at the man by the pillar. He was still watching her, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. He pushed himself off the pillar and moved towards her, his eyes never leaving hers. Leaving already? He asked, his voice a low, husky rumble that sent shivers down her spine. Amelia hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. Yes, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I am. Mind if I join you? She looked at him, at the challenge in his eyes, the promise of adventure in his smile. I don't even know your name, she said, her voice trembling slightly. That's easily remedied, he replied, extending his hand. I'm Julian. And you, I presume, are the woman who just set her gilded cage on fire. Amelia took his hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. I'm Amelia, she said, a smile finally gracing her lips. And yes, I suppose I am. Without another word, Julian led her out of the ballroom, leaving behind the glittering facade of the Vandergelt Charity Gala and stepping into the unknown. As they walked into the night, Amelia felt a sense of liberation she hadn't experienced in years. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt alive. The cool night air was a welcome contrast to the stifling heat of the ballroom. Julian hailed a cab, and as they climbed inside, Amelia took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "So," Julian said, turning to her with a mischievous glint in his eyes, "where to?" Amelia looked at him, at his enigmatic smile, and realized she had no idea. She had no plan, no destination, no idea what she was going to do. But that was part of the thrill. "Anywhere but here," she said, her voice filled with a newfound confidence. "Somewhere different. Somewhere real." Julian grinned. "I know just the place." The cab pulled away from the Vandergelt mansion, leaving behind the manicured lawns and imposing gates. As they drove through the city, Amelia watched the lights blur past, each one a symbol of the life she was leaving behind. She didn't feel regret, only a sense of anticipation. "Where are we going?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "It's a surprise," Julian said, his eyes twinkling. "Just trust me." Amelia hesitated, then nodded. Trust him. It was a leap of faith, a reckless act of defiance against the carefully constructed life she had always known. But in that moment, with Julian beside her, she felt like she could do anything. The cab eventually pulled up in front of a small, unassuming building in a less than glamorous part of town. It was a jazz club, the kind of place Amelia would never have even considered visiting in her previous life. "What is this place?" she asked, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "This," Julian said, his voice full of enthusiasm, "is where the real music lives. Where the souls of the city come to unwind. Come on, you'll love it." He led her inside, and Amelia was immediately enveloped by a wave of sound and energy. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the scent of cheap whiskey. A jazz band was playing on a small stage, their music raw and passionate. The crowd was a mix of artists, students, and other free spirits, all lost in the rhythm of the music. Amelia felt a pang of apprehension. This was so far removed from her sheltered world, so different from the polished perfection she was accustomed to. But as she looked around, she also felt a sense of excitement. This was real. This was authentic. This was a world where she could be herself, without pretense or expectation. Julian led her to a small table in the corner, and they sat down, ordering drinks from a waitress with a bright smile and a no-nonsense attitude. "So," Julian said, leaning back in his chair and studying her with his piercing blue eyes, "tell me about this gilded cage you escaped from." Amelia took a sip of her drink, a strong, bitter cocktail that burned going down. She hesitated, then began to tell him about her life, about the expectations, the pressures, the suffocating boredom. She told him about Charles, about the life they had built together, about the emptiness that had been growing inside her for years. As she spoke, she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, a burden she had been carrying for far too long. Julian listened intently, his eyes full of understanding and empathy. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't try to offer solutions. He simply listened, and that, in itself, was a gift. "And now," she said, finishing her story with a sigh, "here I am. Starting over. With nothing but the clothes on my back and a complete stranger." Julian smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile that reached his eyes. "Sometimes," he said, "starting over is the best thing you can do. And I'm not a complete stranger. I'm Julian. Your accomplice in this grand escape." Amelia laughed, a genuine, spontaneous laugh that bubbled up from deep inside her. "My accomplice," she repeated, shaking her head. "I like the sound of that." They spent the rest of the night talking, laughing, and listening to the music. Amelia learned that Julian was an artist, a painter who had spent years traveling the world, capturing its beauty on canvas. He was passionate, intelligent, and fiercely independent. He was everything Charles was not. As the night wore on, Amelia felt herself drawn to Julian, drawn to his energy, his passion, his genuine spirit. She felt a connection with him that she hadn't felt with anyone in years. When the club finally closed, Julian walked her back to the cab. As they stood on the sidewalk, waiting for the driver to arrive, Amelia felt a sense of nervousness wash over her. The night was coming to an end, and she had no idea what was going to happen next. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For tonight. For everything." Julian smiled and reached out to take her hand. "The night's not over yet," he said, his eyes full of unspoken promises. The cab arrived, and Julian opened the door for her. As she climbed inside, he leaned down and whispered in her ear, "I have a feeling this is just the beginning." He gave her the address of a small hotel, a place that was far removed from the luxury and extravagance she was used to. It was simple, clean, and anonymous. It was perfect. As she lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, Amelia felt a mix of excitement and fear. She had burned her bridges, walked away from her life, and thrown herself into the unknown. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she was finally free. The next morning, Amelia woke up feeling refreshed and invigorated. She showered, dressed in the clothes she had worn the night before, and went downstairs for breakfast. As she sat in the hotel's small dining room, sipping her coffee and looking out the window, she felt a pang of anxiety. What was she going to do now? She had no money, no possessions, no plan. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from Julian. "Meet me at the park at noon. I have a surprise for you." Amelia smiled. She had no idea what Julian had in store for her, but she was eager to find out. At noon, she arrived at the park and found Julian waiting for her, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Good morning," he said, his voice full of warmth. "Ready for an adventure?" Amelia laughed. "I was born ready." Julian led her to a nearby art supply store. Inside, he bought her a sketchbook, a set of charcoal pencils, and a small watercolor set. "What's this for?" Amelia asked, confused. "Remember when you told me you loved to paint?" Julian said, his eyes sparkling. "Well, now you have no excuse not to." Amelia was speechless. She hadn't painted in years, not since she had become Mrs. Charles Vandergeltfor and her life had been consumed by social obligations and expectations. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her eyes filling with tears. "Say you'll use them," Julian said, taking her hand. "Say you'll rediscover the passion that you've been hiding for so long." Amelia nodded, her heart overflowing with gratitude. "I will," she said, her voice full of emotion. "I promise." They spent the rest of the day in the park, Amelia sketching and painting, Julian offering encouragement and advice. It was the most fulfilling day she had had in years. As the sun began to set, Julian took her to a small, cozy Italian restaurant for dinner. Over pasta and wine, they talked about their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. "So," Julian said, leaning across the table and taking her hand, "what are you going to do about Charles?" Amelia sighed. She had been avoiding thinking about her husband, about the life she had left behind. "I don't know," she said, her voice heavy with uncertainty. "I guess I'll have to file for divorce." Julian nodded. "That's probably for the best. But you can't just disappear, Amelia. You need to tell him why you left. You need to give him a chance to understand." Amelia hesitated. She wasn't sure she wanted to face Charles, to relive the pain and disappointment of their marriage. "I know it's not going to be easy," Julian said, sensing her hesitation. "But it's the right thing to do. For both of you." Amelia took a deep breath. He was right. She couldn't just run away and hide. She needed to confront her past, to close that chapter of her life before she could move on. "Okay," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "I'll do it." The next day, Amelia called Charles and asked to meet him. He agreed, his voice cold and distant. They met at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop in a part of town where they were unlikely to be recognized. Charles arrived looking impeccable as always, his face etched with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Amelia," he said, his voice stiff, "what is the meaning of this? Where have you been? Do you have any idea the scandal you've caused?" Amelia took a deep breath and steeled herself. "Charles," she said, her voice calm and steady, "I left you because I was unhappy. Because I was suffocating in our marriage. Because I wasn't allowed to be myself. Charles stared at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "I gave you everything you could ever want. A beautiful home, a comfortable life, social status. Those things don't matter to me, Charles," Amelia interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "I want something more. I want passion, I want excitement, I want to feel alive. And I couldn't find any of that with you." Charles's face reddened. "So, this is about some other man? You left me for someone else?" Amelia hesitated. While Julian had been a catalyst, he wasn't the reason for her departure. "It isn't about someone else, Charles. It's about me. It's about finding myself." "But yes," she admitted, "I met someone. Someone who sees me for who I am." Charles slammed his fist on the table, making the coffee cups jump. "Who is he? Some fortune hunter?" "It doesn't matter who he is, Charles," Amelia said, her voice firm. "What matters is that I deserve to be happy. And I wasn't happy with you. I want a divorce." Charles glared at her, his eyes full of hatred. "You'll regret this, Amelia," he spat. "You'll come crawling back to me, begging for forgiveness. And when you do, I won't take you back." Amelia stood up, her head held high. "I don't think I will, Charles. And I wish you well." She turned and walked away, leaving Charles seething with anger and resentment. As she stepped out into the street, she felt a sense of closure, a sense of freedom. She had done what she needed to do. She had faced her past. And now, she could finally move on. She found Julian waiting for her at a nearby park bench. He looked at her, his eyes full of concern. "How did it go?" Amelia smiled, a weight lifted from her shoulders. "It's over, Julian. I'm free." Julian stood up and wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I'm proud of you, Amelia," he said. "You're incredibly brave." They spent the next few weeks exploring the city together, visiting museums, art galleries, and hidden gems that Amelia had never even known existed. Julian introduced her to his friends, a group of creative, unconventional people who welcomed her with open arms. Amelia rediscovered her love of painting, spending hours in her small apartment, lost in her art. She felt a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment that she had never experienced before. One evening, as they were sitting on Julian's balcony, watching the sunset, he turned to her, his eyes full of tenderness. "Amelia," he said, his voice soft, "I'm falling in love with you." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She looked at Julian, at his kind, intelligent eyes, and realized that she was falling in love with him too. "I'm falling in love with you too, Julian," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. He leaned in and kissed her, a slow, passionate kiss that sealed their fate. They continued to explore their relationship, building a life together based on love, trust, and mutual respect. Amelia learned to embrace her independence, to follow her passions, and to live life on her own terms. A year later, Amelia and Julian were married in a small, intimate ceremony, surrounded by their closest friends and family. It was a far cry from the lavish Vandergelt weddings she had attended in the past, but it was perfect. It was real. It was authentic. It was everything she had ever wanted. As she stood at the altar, looking into Julian's eyes, Amelia knew that she had made the right decision. She had left her gilded cage, embraced her true self, and found a love that was worth fighting for. Her life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt and insecurity. But she was happy. She was fulfilled. She was free. And as she looked out at the faces of her loved ones, Amelia knew that she had finally found her place in the world. A place where she could be herself, without pretense or expectation. A place where she could truly live. A place where she could finally be Amelia. Years passed. Amelia and Julian's love deepened, weathered by the inevitable storms of life, but always returning to the calm center of their shared connection. Amelia became a respected artist, her paintings reflecting her journey of self-discovery and the vibrant tapestry of her new life. She used her platform to support other women escaping oppressive situations, sharing her story and encouraging them to find their own voices. Charles, after a period of bitterness and resentment, eventually remarried. Amelia heard through the grapevine that he had chosen a woman who perfectly fit the mold he desired, a woman who would seamlessly blend into the Vandergelt world. Amelia felt a pang of something that might have been sadness, but it quickly dissipated. She had chosen her own path, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. One sunny afternoon, Amelia and Julian were walking through the park, hand in hand, just as they had done countless times. They stopped by a small pond where children were sailing toy boats. Amelia watched them, a wistful expression on her face. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked, his voice gentle. "I was just thinking about children," Amelia said. "About how much I would love to have a family." Julian smiled and put his arm around her. "I would love that too, Amelia," he said. "But we have our family, don't we? Our friends, our art, our love." Amelia nodded, her heart full. They did have a family built on love and acceptance, not obligation and expectation. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. A few months later, Amelia received a letter from a lawyer. A woman she had briefly known during her marriage to Charles had passed away, leaving behind a young daughter. The woman had named Amelia as the child's guardian, knowing of Amelia's kind heart and her desire to help others. Amelia was stunned. She had never considered adopting a child, but as she looked at the photo of the little girl, her heart melted. The girl, named Lily, had the same fiery red hair and green eyes as Penelope, a reminder of the friend who had always supported her. Amelia discussed it with Julian, and without hesitation, they both agreed to take Lily in. It was a leap of faith, a new chapter in their lives, but they were ready. Lily brought a new dimension of joy and love to their lives. Amelia thrived as a mother, sharing her passion for art and encouraging Lily to embrace her own unique talents. Julian became a doting father, teaching Lily about the world and showering her with affection. Together, they formed a family born not of blood, but of love, compassion, and a shared desire to make the world a better place. Amelia had finally found everything she had been searching for, a fulfilling career, a passionate love, and a family that she cherished above all else. She had escaped her gilded cage and created a life that was truly her own. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The sparkle of the Vandergelt Gala was replaced with the warm glow of a life well lived, a life chosen, a life authentically, beautifully Amelia's. And as she looked at Julian and Lily, she knew. She was finally, truly, home.